COYW made a yo-yo so exemplary of their whole vibe that literally everyone resoundingly agreed that it's the most COYW yo-yo ever. The peak is iconic, but it's just the number one. I'm talking about the yo-yo so dang caribou-lodge that the cross-section is literally designed to look like antlers, and the fact that it was actually good. We're talking about the Chief. Every yo-yo company has a yo-yo they're known for, something where you think of the brand and your mind immediately goes to that particular yo-yo. Just saying that probably made a few brands and a few of their yo-yos shoot straight to the forefront of your mind, such as Yo-Yo Factory with the shutter and edge. If you yo-yoed a lot before Gentry won 2014 Worlds, you probably thought of the Supernova, 888, and the Star series. You may think of Something and the Anglam, or you might think of Duncan and the Freehand. For some brands, they might not have one individual yo-yo, but they have a sort of aesthetic or vibe that comes to mind when you think of them. For example, Atmos has a minimalist, almost urban aesthetic, but COYW managed to do both at the same time with the Chief. That yo-yo didn't just become something iconic or change their vibe, it almost became synonymous with the name COYW itself, and almost no one will disagree. Over 10 years after it was first released, and over half a decade since the yo-yo stopped being produced by COYW, to this day, the Chief's status as the COYW represent hasn't really changed, and the story of the Chief is long and even has some controversy. So buckle up. The lead up to the Chief's release is long and fun. The very first mention of the Chief was in an over 10-year-old Yo-Yo Expert blog. This blog was posted on March 11th, 2010, and details Jensen leaving Caribou Lodge for Yo-Yo Factory, another run of the Bear vs. Man, and then finally, a teaser for the upcoming Chief. The extent of the teaser was Chris name-dropping it and the box art image, and also that it was going to be a nipple-free yo-yo. Only one image exists of a prototype Chief without a nipple. Those who know the Chief also know that this prototype is missing the Chief's iconic double rims. A month later, on April 13th, Chris would post a teaser for the Chief on the blog with some of the late Paul Escolar's artwork titled Coming Soon. Bummer for anyone that'd be interested in more news regarding the Chief, as it'd take over a year for a drop of news. That drop of news came in the form of a blog titled Anyone Got a Clue? With a single image of a black Chief, released on May 10th, 2011. Chris made people bust out the cryptology, and also probably threw everybody off because this Chief had a nipple, and when he announced the Chief initially, he said it was going to be a nipple-free yo-yo. The momentum of the Chief started picking up a bit as Jensen Kimmett would compete with the Chief for his 2011 Worlds performance in August. Jensen placed 9th after only throwing the yo-yo once for the entire performance. Upcoming news of the Chief wouldn't take much longer, just 2 months, as on October 7th, there would be 3 new blog posts. One of 2 Chiefs with a box featuring the Chief artwork, one of the Chief profile and Chris's dog Yogi, and then finally, the Chief's full specs. Each of these featured artwork by Paul Escolar, who passed away in 2021. Then, Chris posted a full unboxing video of the Chief on October 8th, a day later. Okay, COYW fans wouldn't have to wait long for the Chief, as it dropped on October 25th, 2011, just a couple weeks later. Just kidding, it had a 2-day delay and had its full release on October 27th, 2011. There's a guy on the Yo-Yo Expert forums who asked if he should get an Avalanche or a Chief, and literally nobody responded to him. The first release of Chiefs came in 3 colors: blue, silver, and gold. Allegedly, there were 75 of the first run of Chiefs, each spread throughout the different stores, but at the very least it can be said there were 31 total on Yo-Yo Expert, split between 21 gold, 6 blue, and 8 silver Chiefs. And the Yo-Yo Expert forum members apparently had timers, because according to Yo-Yo Expert user Nevo, the Chief sold out in 4 minutes on Yo-Yo Expert. This first release would mark the beginning of a 5-year-long legacy spanning over 10 runs of the Chief. Before I'll really get into the stuff of this video, the Chief was a special yo-yo for a few reasons. For one, as far as I can tell, it's the first yo-yo ever to be made and released with double rims, which is one of the most iconic features of the Chief. Of course, there is some mild debate, mostly regarding the semantics of what qualifies as double rims, but in regards to the particular type of double rims the Chief has, it was the first of its kind. Also, the Chief was a really good yo-yo. If you read old write-ups about the Chief, it's commonly regarded as a highly performing yo-yo. In some instances, it's even acknowledged as a competition model, which is not what people would necessarily describe it as in 2024. There was a lot of variance between each of the Chief runs in regards to their weight, ranging from 65.2 grams all the way up to 68.4 grams. Unfortunately, time has not treated the Chief well. If you look up basically anything about the Chief, you get redirected to like really simple wiki pages or old product pages. So compiling information like which colorways came with which runs and also what those runs weighed in at is an arduous task. I spent lots of time reading old blogs and forum threads for this video, but I've done my best. We will run through which colorways came with which run, at least to the best of my ability. I'm not going to say each of the colorways and run you through every single one. I'm just going to have the colorway on screen, preferably of a Chief, with every colorway in that run on screen. If it's a big run, don't worry, I won't make you squint. I'll just fade them in and out. Also, there's a little bit of a haze of what counts as a run. COYW likes to do one-off releases or special batches that consist of a very small stock of a colorway. If you need a modern example, think of their Golden Akitas. They only made 5 and it was sort of a raffle giveaway thing if you found an engraving under the pad of a Yeti. I wouldn't necessarily call that small batch of Golden Akitas a run of Golden Akitas. It's more of a walk, and the Chiefs had a lot of the same business going on. I'll indicate whether or not it's a smaller batch, and I'll actually say the name on screen and what makes it special. So, to get into it, the first run was mentioned earlier, gold, silver, and blue. It gets special treatment because it was the first run. Released on October 27th, 2011, and it weighed 65.2 grams. The second run came very shortly after. October 29th, 2011 yielded at least 9 new colorways. This run was heavier at 66.3 grams. Following the second run was a small batch of Meteorite Chiefs. As far as I know, Chris only made 6 of them, and they're extremely rare and highly sought after. Allegedly, these Meteorite Chiefs weigh 66.3 grams. The third run of Chiefs would be teased on November 16th, 2011 with a Yo-Yo Expert release on December 4th, 2011. This third run weighed in at 65.2 grams, like the first run. Somewhere along the release of the third run, there was a very limited promo where you could earn a Dragon Chief as a reward. The way you would get this Chief was by getting a Narwhal 1 with a puffin engraving on it. As far as I know, there's only one Dragon Chief, and I'd guess it was made along with and has the same weight as the third run of Chief. I don't have the exact weight because it's not specified anywhere. The same goes for the Black Bip Bop Chief. The Black Bip Bop Chiefs are most often cited as being made of 7075 aluminum and weighing up to 68.4 grams. But again, I don't have the exact weight because it's not definitively specified anywhere. Allegedly, the Dandelion Chief is also supposed to be made of 7075. This is where the legacy of the Chief starts to become hazy. Googling word for word COYW Chief 4th run yields 0 results on Google that are helpful. There isn't a single thread or blog post that officially marks the release of the 4th run from COYW, Yo-Yo Expert, or any other retailer. At least none that I could find. So I enlisted the help of the Yo-Yo Expert forums to help me find a more accurate answer. And after a day or so of no real answer, a friend of mine, Spence, was actually able to find truly helpful information. Based on what I was able to find and what Spence was able to find, the 4th run was an incredibly small run consisting of as little as 3 colorways. I'm not saying definitively there were only 3 colorways, but that's just, at minimum, that's how little there were in this run. It was released on Yo-Yo Expert on December 15th, 2011. At least 2 different forum members cited that the 4th run of Chiefs was meant to be heavier, with one specifically measuring it at 65.9 grams, though at least 2 sources cite that the 4th run was meant to weigh around 66.2 to 66.3 grams. But again, special thanks to Spence for finding out the bulk of this information. I spent hours on my own looking and picking through forum threads, the Wayback Machine, and COYW blog posts just to find basically nothing. So thanks, Spence. The release timeline between the 3rd, 4th, and 5th runs are incredibly tight together, as the 5th run would get teased on COYW's website on January 13th, 2012. But based on dates from the Yo-Yo Expert forums, its retail release wouldn't happen until around a month later in February. More than likely, the 5th run released on Yo-Yo Expert on February 17th, 2011, and it weighed 65.2 grams. It is possible the 5th run included a special edition Peter Kafka Chief called the Peter Kafka Heavy Whale Chief, which is meant to weigh in at 67.4 grams. But it is also possible the Peter Kafka Chief was only meant to be 66 grams. Also, there's a colorway of the Chief in here that I've seen be ID'd as Saskatoon Berry, which would make it a standard release of the Chief, as opposed to Saskatoon Blizzard, which is allegedly one of the 68.4 gram 7075 Chiefs. But there seems to be some confusion about which one was actually the 7075 version, or even which one is supposed to be which colorway. But Saskatoon Berry is the 6061 release, and it was released with the 5th run according to the Wayback Machine, and Saskatoon Blizzard was the 7075 release. The 6th run of Chiefs is also slightly confusing. It's possible the Peter Kavka Chief also got released or even restocked along with the 6th run. A Yo-Yo Expert blog, which was basically a repost of the COYW blog, puts the teaser for this on March 5th, 2012, and the release for the 6th run a little over a week later on March 13th, 2012. Allegedly, this run weighed in at 66 grams. The 7th run of Chiefs thankfully got directly teased with a dedicated weight from Caribou Lodge. On April 12th, 2012, COYW teased the 7th run, which weighed 66 grams. At least, a bulk of the 7th run was 66 grams. But the Jackrabbit colorway weighed 65.2 grams based on at least 2 sources. Sometimes the Latitude 53 colorway is cited as being a second colorway released in the 7th run that weighed 65.2 grams, but based on the Wayback Machine information, it actually released with the 5th run, which also makes sense because that run weighed 65.2 grams. Things should hopefully begin to be a little more clear from here on. There was a special release of the Great Bip Bop Chief, which is attributed to belonging in this run. The 8th run was teased on COYW's website on June 22nd, 2012, with a full release on July 12th, 2012. This run weighed in at about 66 grams. The 9th run was teased on COYW's website on September 6th, 2012, with a full release on September 19th, 2012. This run weighed in at about 66 grams. The 10th run was fully released on November 8th, 2012. This run weighed in at about 66 grams with a special Heavy Splash Clairview Station colorway. The 11th run was teased on January 8th, 2013 with a subsequent release on January 29th, 2013. This run weighed in at about 66 grams. Spliced between the teasing and release of the 11th run was a COYW website-only release of some 7075 Hulk Smash Chiefs. Teased on January 15th, 2013 and fully released on January 17th, 2013, these 7075 Chiefs weighed in at 68.4 grams according to COYW. As far as I can tell, over the duration of this year, it was mostly just small restocks and color re-releases, but things get slightly hazy again as these last couple releases of the Chiefs are rather confusing chronologically. COYW didn't explicitly tease a release of the Chief for over a year, but if you sift through release blogs on Yo-Yo Expert, you get a new restock or release about once every 3 or so months. This could mean that the 11th run specs were the one that COYW just ran for over a year or so and just rehashed in new colorways. This could also mean that they did a staggered release, meaning they produced it all at once and then released it in batches. It could also mean that they just didn't blog all the releases. Or the 12th run happened soon after the 11th, and basically most of the year-long gap between the announcement of a new run of Chiefs was 12th run Chiefs and not 11th run Chiefs. There's no way of knowing besides a very small blurb on the Wayback Machine for the Yo-Yo Expert website that specifies if a Chief is the 11th release. This blurb verifiably exists between February 2013 and May 2013, and it's gone at the latest by July 2013. If I were to guess, the COYW crew probably just really liked the specs and play feel of the 11th run of Chiefs, so they probably just produced them in new colorways for over a year. And I'm gonna stick with that, as COYW was and is generally good at announcing an explicitly new run. However, by this logic, the 12th run of Chiefs wouldn't be released for over a year after the 11th run of Chiefs, being teased on March 5th, 2014 and released on March 6th, 2014. This run weighed about 65.5 grams. If we believe this means that COYW stuck with the 12th run of Chiefs for over 2.5 years, as they wouldn't tease and release the 13th run of Chiefs until 2016. The 13th, and I believe the final run of Chiefs, was teased on October 27th, 2016, with the full release on the same day. 5 full years after the release of the first run. From what I understand, this run could have weighed 65.5 grams or 66 grams. There's no definitive for sure answer that I could find. The best I can say is that maybe it weighed 66 grams. Yo-Yo Expert weighed the specs of the Chief at about 65.8 grams, and Rewind weighed it at 66.1 grams. So, assuming they updated the weight spec to go along with the current run they would have had in stock, this would mean the 13th run of Chiefs was around 66 grams. But when I fact-checked this with people who were active in or around the yo-yo community from that era, they placed the weight to be at around 66.5 grams. I'd say it's safe to assume the 13th run weighed close to 66 grams. And with that, the runs and their weights are finished. What a nightmare portion of the script that took me literal months to write and finish. But, real quick, there's a special release of the Chief that I haven't mentioned yet, the nickel-plated Chief. You know how I said the meteorite Chiefs were extremely rare and highly sought after? Yeah, the nickel-plated Chiefs are even more rare and sought after. Only 5 exist. So why didn't I bring this up when its release date was relevant? Simple, they were never given a full public release. Allegedly, they were given away to team members. But, at the earliest, the COYW Instagram posted them on March 2nd, 2012. This also means there's no way for me to know how much they weighed either. They're that rare and that little is known about them. To close off the history of the Chief, as far as I can tell, COYW retired the Chief after the 13th run. They don't have any more blog posts following the 13th run teaser. And Yo-Yo Expert doesn't have any blog posts following the release of the 13th run. So, following a 5-year-long lifespan as the Caribou Lodge Yo-Yo, it was retired. Around this time, progressiveness and social justice especially began to become more popular, and the Chief's name began to be scrutinized. Considering Canada's mistreatment of natives and the native-inspired name of the Chief, it worked out that the Chief was retired, as the name didn't look great. But the Chief wasn't going to be fully buried and forgotten. The Chief was, at this point, iconic, and had a vast design lineage even at the time. So instead of completely shelving it and leaving the yo-yo to be discussed in your favorite yo-yo documentary videos, COYW decided to just let the model lie and draw inspiration from it when they saw fit. And eventually, maybe, do a redesign of the Chief. The biggest thing with the Chief, especially in regards to it being the Caribou Lodge yo-yo, is that, yeah, it had the playstyle and stuff, but what really puts it in perspective is how the Chief would go on to inform or inspire an entire family tree of yo-yos. And it's actually kinda big. Now, to be completely honest, this is just following a sort of half-informed list of yo-yos that I could see an immediate inspiration from the Chief, primarily from the double rims. So I'm gonna explain this tree with on-screen graphics. You can see we got a lot of branches, so we're just gonna go down one, the Gormley branch. This is the branch that consists of literally all of Zach Gormley's signatures. Why? Because of the Arctic Circle 1. This was Zach's first signature. It has the double rims. Now, depending on who you ask, the AC1 is actually an extremely important yo-yo in and of itself. Some people credit the AC1 with being the first yo-yo to have the fully open profile with the response bump, and it's a whole thing. Anyways, there's another branch of COYW yo-yos that comes off the AC1 itself, besides the Gormley SIGs, but we're focusing on the Gormley SIGs. So, the next one would be the AC2. While maintaining mostly the same shape, it lost the double rims, kinda. They're still kinda there, but they're not the same. The next one is the Borealis, and this is where the biggest changes. The way the profile was angular and kinda sharp is just gone now. The double rims are also entirely gone. Instead, the Borealis has a much rounder shape and a recessed rim. Zach Gormley used a prototype of the Borealis to win the 2015 World Yo-Yo Contest's 1A division. Then, you got the Big Dipper as like a side product, kinda. It's just a plastic Borealis. The Borealis got a slight touch-up with the Borealis. It was the second version of the Borealis, but I guess Caribou Lodge didn't feel like the differences were big enough to give it the 2 in its name. Which is fair, they're very similar yo-yos with just a handful of changes. The cuts in the profile of the second Borealis go further into the rims, and I think the nipple of the OG Borealis is slightly bigger than the newer Borealis. And then you got the Wish, which is the bimetal version of the Borealis. And that's the end of the Gormley lineup. All of that spawned from the Chief. And going next, there's the Peter Kafka lineup. Peter Kafka's lineup is also kinda nuts. So again, starting with the Chief, we go to the Cliff. It's oversized, a bit boxy, but the double rims are there. There's another branch that sprouts out from the Cliff, but again, we'll get to that later. We're on the Peter Kafka SIGs. Next came the Advanced Scout, a prototype of the Scout that got a limited release of 300 units. The Advanced Scout was almost just seen as an outright update to the Chief, but in the end, it wasn't. It was a prototype of the Scout. Aside from the spec changes, the main difference between the normal Scout and the Advanced Scout is that the normal Scout has a spiked hub. I'm sure that was a fun sentence to hear. Peter Kafka's lineup doesn't deviate too far from the Scout at this point. The lineage is kind of more apparent, and it also kind of just ends with the compass. The hub got a massive overhaul, no more double rims, just a pure recessed rim hub, and a fingerspin bowl, kinda, but the profile remained mostly the same. Then there's the Pally lineup, or just the Puffy lineup, because the name never changed. There's the OG Puffin with the distinctive double rims, though the profile is very far from the Chief's. The next Puffin, the Puffin 2, would lose the double rims and is honestly just a wildly different design. It's a much more standard shape and hub. It almost doesn't look very much like a Caribou Lodge yo-yo. Instead, it has an almost uncanny resemblance to the Rebellion Gazer. And then there's the final yo-yo of the Pally lineup, the Puffin, which is a slightly confusing name because it's actually the third Puffin. This one's design is wild. It's wide with an open profile and a much more distinctively Caribou Lodge hub than the Puffin 2. And that's the end of the Puffin lineup. And then there's the one-off signature, Steve Brown's signature, the Beater. It was somehow Caribou Lodge's first organic yo-yo that used double rims. Another one-off signature with influence directly from the Chief is Yuki Spencer's Kayak. But remember when I teased that there were branches in these lineups? Going back to the AC1, it has a direct lineage that just leads straight into the Boy, the signature of a Yumu Hirata, which is just supposed to be a modern reimagining of the AC1 with slightly tweaked specs and being manufactured in China. Then, from the Cliff comes the Glacier Express. It's really similar to the Cliff, but it has a nipple hub and is undersized, as opposed to the slightly oversized Cliff. Finally, there are the direct offshoots from the Chief itself. These are the yo-yos that are meant to be direct iterations of the Chief in some way. Starting off with the H5X Chief. The H5X Chief was a collaboration between COYW and C3 yo-yos. The yo-yo used the oversized specs and the shape of the H5 from C3 and combined it with the Chief's double rims. Continuing with the Yeti. Some of you may point out that the Yeti has no double rims, but the Yeti was originally designed to be a plastic version of the Chief, so checkmate. The original Yeti was designed with a unique glass-infused plastic, and it even had a blasted-feeling finish. But this blasted-feeling finish caused problems, namely that the finish was so coarse that people had to sand down the response area to keep their string from snapping during play. The first Yeti would get retired due to numerous production problems, with the follow-up, the Yeti 2.0. It was made far bigger and with a more standard plastic, but it too had production problems, so it wasn't in production for long. And then the Yeti lineup concludes with the Metal Yeti. As the name suggests, it was a metal version of the original Yeti. Caribou Lodge produced tons of metal Yetis to keep the price down, and other than Steve alluding to Caribou Lodge trying for another plastic Yeti at some point in the future, that's where the lineup lies. Next up, the Pickaxe. The Pickaxe is fairly cut and dry for an iteration of the Chief. It's just meant to be an undersized version of the Chief. Not much else to comment on. But the next yo-yo is a bit more interesting. The Bear Trap. This iteration of the Chief takes the design and just goes ballistic. The profile of the Bear Trap is very reminiscent of the Chief, but where it goes nuts is the hub. The Bear Trap has a pseudo-capped design with a hole in the middle. But when you look at the cross-section, the influence is apparent. The double rims are still there. It's a surprise Easter egg. But the lore for the Bear Trap doesn't just end there. The concept of a capped yo-yo from Caribou Lodge named the Bear Trap was something Caribou Lodge had previously tested in 2009. The original Bear Trap had removable caps that the user could screw on and off, as well as a much more organic shape reminiscent of the Peak. As pictured, you can see the caps unscrewed on their own and the original intended spiked nipple of the Bear Trap, which would eventually make its return on the modern Bear Trap. For some side lore on this old 2009 Bear Trap, the intention was that the caps would be removable and have an element of collectivity to them. But it never went into production. A design like that is extremely difficult to pull off, both to prevent vibe and to be cost effective, so it never went beyond the prototyping stage. And actually, as far as I learned, the only prototype that exists is owned by Yo-Yo Brothers. So the design legacy of the Bear Trap is actually based on a couple historically charged COYW yo-yos, with the Chief profile and hidden double rims under the cap and the 2009 Bear Trap test. It's kinda nuts. Also, the modern Bear Trap is just ever so slightly undersized compared to the Chief. Is the audio sync? Finally, there's the upcoming iteration of the Chief, the Leaf. This yo-yo has been teased, alluded to, and is very, very hotly anticipated. So what is the Leaf? It's plain and simple a modern Chief. How did they make the OG Chief and modernize it? Well, they made it wider. At least according to Steve, which was the last update anyone on COYW has given regarding the Leaf. But I can't imagine the Leaf being very bad. I mean, surely with the extra width, it'd be more pleasant for a modern audience. Having enough stability to do modern zoning, having that heft to it that just make it feel pleasant. Might not be super great for speed, but that's not what Caribou Lodge is really known for. The power will no doubt be great, and I'm sure it'll be an S-tier yo-yo at least. But y'all will figure that out soon. Thanks for sending me a prototype, Steve, and thank you for watching this documentary. This has been a project in the works now for over a year, and it means a lot to me because COYW themselves helped out and worked with me on this. Caribou Lodge has been very gracious and patient with the incredibly slow burn that was making this documentary. All those runs were really difficult to hunt down and find, but thankfully there were decently accurate sources to help out with that. And with that, I'm finished with this documentary. Thanks for watching, everyone. Stay healthy. Adios.